Hi everybody, it's Alyce-Kay Ruckelshaus from Threshold of Hineni, and I'm here with another installment of the ways that God has gotten me through this whole thing with my husband dying, and just how He's blessed me and everything. And so what I'm doing is I've come up with a lot of ways that He's blessed me and that He's gotten me through, and I put them on slips of paper, and I'm drawing them out randomly because I don't want anybody to feel bad if they did something for me and it's not one of the first things that I talk about. So this is completely random. It's not in any order. I don't know what I'm going to choose. Okay, so Calvary Chapel. This is interesting because this wasn't one of the first things. I had not been going to church. For about 5 years, I had gone to church half a dozen times at the most. And before that, church had always been like this huge part of my life. I loved church. I was super involved. I was always one of the 20% who did 80% of the stuff. And, one of the last ones to leave church because I loved church. I loved being around God's people and everything. And that didn't change. But because of certain things in my life, I went through a lot of condemnation and rejection by Christians. And it finally got to the place where I had panic attacks. I mean, really severe, like feeling like I'm having a heart attack. Panic attacks anytime that I tried to go to church. And it's embarrassing. You can't really participate in church when you're doing this anyway. And I just felt like I was really distracting people. And I didn't like going through it. It's incredibly painful to have a really severe anxiety attack. I know that a lot of you know what I'm talking about. So I didn't go to church for 5 years, about 5 years, and actually probably more like 5.5 years. Anyway, just like a few months before Bill died, we started talking about me going back to church, and us going back to church, because Bill had stayed away from church with me. He didn't want to go without me, and yeah, so we didn't go to church. And so we started talking about going back to church, and he had asked me like what church I would feel comfortable in, because we'd gone like 2 or 3 times to another church here in town that I'd been involved in before, but there were some things that were said that I did okay at first, and then there were some things that were said that were just like really legalistic, and legalism is usually what causes my panic attacks. It's like, because that's where condemnation usually comes from. And I just freaked out and I couldn't go back, and I started having panic attacks even at home. And so, we didn't try for like a couple years. And so then, we got to the place where I was feeling again like I could try going to church. And he said, well, it's up to you where we go, because I want you to go someplace where you're going to feel safe. And I said, before we left here and moved up to Minnesota, we were going to Calvary Chapel, and the pastor there was just really incredible, not just because he was a good preacher or anything like that, because he was, but and he's a man of God. I mean, definitely a man of God, and of course that's important, but also because he was really protective of women who were being abused. And honestly, I've only seen that from one other pastor, who was not my pastor, but was somebody else's pastor. And for the most part, I have found pastors to be, now this doesn't mean that every pastor is this way, so please don't be offended if you're in a church that's not like this, or your pastor isn't like this, but the churches that I went to, the pastors did more to keep me in abusive situations than to help me get out of them. And in a lot of ways ended up, not intentionally, but the end result was that they basically encourage abusers. And I really do not think that that's what they intend, that that's what happens. And I felt safe at Calvary. So we were planning to go back, to go to Calvary. And I don't know, it just hadn't worked out by the time that he died. We had been talking about it, I think, for a couple months, but once you stop going to church, you guys, it's hard to start going again. It just is. And that's another reason to try not to stop. I didn't tell very many people that I wasn't going to church, not because I was ashamed of it, but because I didn't want anybody to go, oh, she doesn't go to church, that's okay. I didn't want to set a bad example, because I do think it is really important to be involved in a church. and and well, I won't get into that. That's a whole different thing. But anyway, so after Bill died, for the first few months, I didn't feel like I needed to change anything. And in fact, I had kind of a bad experience with some people from a local church. And so that didn't help any. It was just more of the condemnation kind of stuff and everything. And it just didn't help any. And, but eventually, like around October or so, I started feeling like I really, really need to get back to church. And the time was about to change in November. And, one of the things that made it a little hard for me to go to church was that I worked until 10 a.m. And so on Sundays. And so, I could still get to church, but it was really hard. So I decided that when the time changed, I was going to start going to church. And so I went to Calvary Chapel, and I got there. The first few Sundays I got there late intentionally because I didn't want to have to talk to anybody. I just wanted to sneak in, and I sat in the back and I just cried the whole time, partly because I was still hurting so much from Bill dying, and partly because I was scared of being in church. And even though I felt like this was a safe church, I was just scared. And anyway, so the first Sunday, the pastor's wife, when she was leaving to teach children's church, she noticed me and kind of, smiled and waved at me. And I was kind of surprised that she remembered me because we had only gone there for a few months before moving up to Minnesota. And, but it made me feel good that she remembered me. And then, when I started trying to come on time and I tried to start moving up towards the front, it was like at first people they smiled at me and said hi, but they didn't do a lot. And it wasn't that they weren't being friendly. I really felt like they understood that I was scared or shy or something. I don't know what they thought, but I felt protected by them. I didn't feel ignored or like they were being unfriendly because they didn't say hi to me or stuff or, try to get me to talk. It was like they could tell that I didn't want to engage in conversation, and I left like right before church ended and stuff, so people didn't really have a chance. But as I started moving up farther, because I really like to sit close to the front so that I'm not so distracted during church, and I started moving up closer to the front, and I started, like saying hi to people and everything. People were just so loving, and the people who had been there before, who I didn't think would remember me, they did remember me, and they just welcomed me back. And the people who were new welcomed me into their church. And it's just been really, really precious. I have felt very loved there. I've felt very nurtured there. I'm not scared being there anymore, which is really a big thing. I'm not sure I could feel safe going to another church yet, or maybe ever. I don't know. We'll just let God take it one step at a time. But right now I'm at Calvary, and it's just really good, and I've enjoyed it. And right now during the quarantine has been really hard for me because I miss those people. I'm used to staying home. It was just Bill and me here at home. I sometimes I would go for months and not step outside the door because he did the shopping. He didn't like me to go grocery shopping because I would buy a lot more than what we needed. And so he did the grocery shopping. So I had no reason to leave because I work from home. And, sometimes we go, oh my goodness, he'd go, when was the last time that you went outside? And it was like, 3 months ago, So we'd go for a drive and a picnic or something. And he'd take me out to dinner or something. So I did not expect this quarantine to be difficult for me because I have become extremely introverted since this whole thing of having panic attacks and everything, and not really wanting to be around people. But because I had started back to church, being quarantined has been very difficult for me because I miss those people. I miss spending time with them. They are just precious. And we haven't talked very much. They didn't know Bill, so we haven't talked much about that or anything, but I just know that they're there for me. And there are people, some of the people especially, who I know I can call anytime that I need to, and they've really become family to me. So that's one of the ways that God's blessed me. And anyway, I love you all, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.